It is not me. This is Anthony George's assistant. Her name is Liz. Liz is right now in Africa, but I just signed a book for her, which was really exciting, and it was really very nice to meet him. So my airplane pitch, which is, when I'm on a trip and people say, "What are you doing?" So I'm writing this book, and this is the story of how during my first years of motherhood, I chased eclipses, migrations, and other natural phenomena around the world to reawaken my own sense of wonder. So in that process, I discovered that there is an entire subculture of phenomena chasers all the time. They're just dedicating their lives to being where the next eclipse is or to seeing the northern lights. And so what I'm going to share with you is a little passage that happened right after I met James. So James really changed the trajectory of my story. But I met James at Ice Hotel, where he was officially a builder of snow and ice. That was his job title, like on his cards. He has business cards. So James is an eclipse chaser, but he works his life so that in the in-between seasons, he can be under the northern lights. So, James, here he is. He's invited me to go out with him in search of the lights. I've been directed to him as someone who might be able to share some things about it. So James is quite a character. When we meet up later that evening in a wood-built, heated dining room, I tell James that as much as I'd like to see the northern lights, I'm also hoping to hear them. Every year, thousands of people report that they've heard the aurora. I've met nearly a dozen witnesses myself. What they claim to hear isn't the impossible to make out waves of infrasound that have been recorded in the aurora at high altitudes. No, they claim to have been witness to the yet-to-be-recorded or scientifically explained, totally audible phenomenon that is the light's signature song. There is ancient precedent. The sounding word for aurora roughly translates as the lights that make noise. James is skeptical. I've spent thousands of hours with the aurora and I've never seen it before, he says. We burst outside and find a crowd gathered. Above, the aurora is tingling toward the bottom of its arc. The lower sections look like pink fingers dancing across an invisible piano. They extend down in various lengths. Pinky finger, pointer. The upper stretch is a slender solar storm is somehow more delicate than I'd imagined it to be. It's a wisp of color. Stars are visible in the background as it slithers and twirls, shrinks and spreads. James shouts, "Look, pink! That's as good as it gets!" The top of the aurora is glowing green, but the animate bottom is pink as my son's nose after a day of playing in snow. "Amazing!" someone shouts. The tinkling pink energy dances, pounding out a visible song. It is revealing the edge of our atmosphere. We are seeing the visceral meeting of space and earth, the bit of pure sunshine that has slipped through all protective measures to shine in our faces. It is, in essence, a visual reminder of life's tentative covenant with the universe. The sky is bursting into pink flashes. I mean, when does that happen, James says. Well, now, for instance. I can't speak. I'm trying to focus, attempting to let the street lamps and crowds at Ice Hotel fall away. But just as I'm beginning to get a feel for the lights, just as I have gathered myself together so that I might be able to think about what I'm seeing, turning to explanations of nitrogen and oxygen, instead of standing here, the lights disappear. They don't slip off stage, no, they twirl themselves into nothingness. I turn to James and say, "I need to see that again." He nods and says, "Yeah, that's it. You get it. Just imagine what it feels like with an eclipse. I've got to wait 3 years to see it again. See, you're spoiled with the aurora. Maybe it'll come back for dessert." But we skipped sweet treats to wander the shores of the Torn, the best place to view the aurora in Ukasiabe. We slip-slide across a snow-covered river. I've been told that the Torn is beginning to groan, but it's quiet tonight. There's no crackling from above or below. But suddenly, the sky stirs. Out of nowhere, the aurora appears, exploding into groves of green. "You're just batting 1,000, James says. "Look, it's twisting. Whoa!" He ducks a little. "Imagine if you saw that over your apple orchard in Normandy and didn't know what it was." The northern lights are not confined to the Arctic. Aristotle wrote of them. Julius Caesar once dispatched troops when he thought the lights were a raging town fire. In 1938, A rare appearance in England made Londoners think Windsor Castle was burning. And right now, at this very minute, the aurora is taking on the shape of an antler above my head. It breaks into horseshoe-shaped pieces that dance across the sky, prancing like the reindeer of Santa's sleigh. It actually might not be a coincidence that Santa's sleigh is pulled by reindeer, the animal Sami have depended on for thousands of years, or that the elves of the North Pole wear replicas of traditional Sami shoes, which are pointed at the tip to fit into skis. Santa might be an appropriated version of a Sami shaman who used drums to navigate between worlds and consumed hallucinogenic red and white mushrooms. The shaman are said to have been represented on some historic drums as being on a sledge, a small sleigh, being pulled through the air by reindeer. When I looked for books on Sami mythology and the aurora at the library of a local university, nearly half of what I found was in the children's section. This seems awfully revealing of how we see myth. When someone is acting naively, foolishly, we say, well, you might as well believe in Santa Claus. Myth and mystery in a rational age is something you're expected to grow out of. Though ironically, we bemoan the loss of magic. We don't make room for adult-sized fables, but some cultures believe we get closer to mystery as we age. I've noticed that the aurora makes talking about this sort of spirituality more acceptable than usual. I've had friends of all religious and non-religious stripes tell me they imagine the aurora as some sort of mystical phenomenon. The word mystical derives from mystery, the Greek mystis, initiate, and mystos, keeping silent. To have a spiritual experience doesn't require adopting a system of belief, a code of conduct, or dogma, traditional or woo-woo. According to William James, mystical or spiritual experiences are, by definition, temporary and impossible to encapsulate in language. R.M. Burke referred to them as moments of cosmic consciousness. Maslow called them peak experiences. But whatever you want to call them, I'm totally having one. James is whirling in the snow like a dervish, marrying the swirling lights in a ritualistic sort of dance. A lot of cultures up here believe the lights are the spirits of the dead. It's about realizing mortality and being initiated into an awareness of creation, James says, staggering to get his balance. If so, James is more enlightened than most, but it hasn't come without cost. He tells me that he sacrificed a lot for his life of continuous celestial quest. He does not have a family or permanent home. He follows employment notices to stay within the Aurora Oval, as the Sami have followed the natural patterns of reindeer for more than 8,000 years. James nods toward the heavens. Right now, we're waking up. This blows the doors off everything ordinary. It explodes the ego. It's about the death of ego. Ego death is when you stop thinking about yourself, and you realize you're connected to the entire universe. It's the us. His voice gains octave. He's shouting now. It's like something out of Lord of the Rings, but it's real! Real epiphenomena! The lights curve into the hook of a J. It's almost as if they're writing out letters on a slate too large to see. James is shaking his head, as if even after all these years, after all these magnificent ways the universe has revealed itself to him, he still has difficulty believing such beauty can exist. It's a blessing, he says. Sheepishly, I admit, wanting to hear the lights as well as see them just seems greedy, doesn't it? Yeah, he says, that's actually what I was just thinking. It's like you're asking for the impossible. He's right. But still, there's a sliver of hope in me. As a totally yogied out friend of mine recently said when I was having one of those pesky, who am I to ask for more moments? You wouldn't ask for more if you didn't believe there was more to be had. You have faith in abundance, and that's not a bad thing. James concedes, I do have friends that swear by the sounds. I have a theory that they're created by electrical discharges. Many in the scientific community concur. The lights, 50 miles above our heads, are in an area believed to have insufficient air to transmit audible sound waves. Some scientists believe that if there is a physical source of sounds, it can be attributed to tiny electrical discharges, a chorus of millions of microscopic lightning bolts firing off of earthbound things. There's also a theory that purports that the noise is all in people's heads, not in an you lost your mind way, but as a physiological reaction. Some researchers believe that the electromagnetic field produced during the aurora actually has the potential to affect the bioelectricity of the human nervous system. All human knowledge begins in the senses. The brain gets it second hand. My fingers are stinging from cold. I ball my hands into fists and pull them into my gloves. I'm willing to move inside. The show isn't over, but it will likely dissolve as quickly as it came. James paces a little, beyond an archway of ice, his work boots squeaking in the snow like rubber-soled sneakers on a basketball court. I can hear the hum of a far-off streetlight, the chatter of day visitors making their way to the hotel's ice bar, where alcohol is served in chalices carved from the river, but the sky isn't making a sound. Still, visual whispers of sunlight are slipping into the coldest, darkest hour of night. I will never see these lights again. No one else will ever see exactly what I've seen. When the aurora retreats, leaving the winter sky as hardened as it was before that first green sky sprout began to stir, I have a hard time getting my bearings. James is sympathetic. The aurora is the manifestation of light where darkness is expected, he says. No matter how much you've read about it, you're never really prepared for that. So there's James. Yeah. James is out there chasing, and if you've read the book, or if you're going to read the book, Kate Russo, Eclipse Chasing, psychologist, she's out there chasing. She spent a month on a tiny island in the Arctic attempting to see the solar eclipse that was visible only from that very specific location, March 20th, 4 days before the book came out. She spent a month scouting locations, this and that, and on eclipse day, totally clouded out.
Oh.
But she wasn't disappointed. I mean, she was. I think she was. But here's the thing: when you chase that's what you're opening yourself up to, right? And so we have this saying that it's the journey, not the destination. But phenomena chasers really. I mean, I think it's a living out of this sense of ambiguity and the journey, and so just appreciating that process. And so this is my story. So would you like to ask some questions? I don't know. Do you have any questions about the story? I don't know. Talk to me. Yes.
Yeah, how did you ever get involved in this? Where does this come from? Your fascination with this? Was it when you were a kid, or how did this?
So I've been writing this book for 5 years. It's been out for 2 weeks, you guys. So super excited. And in some ways, I've been writing this for all my life, right? So where does the interest come from? I mean, I think that, right, in childhood, I mean, I have always connected with nature, the natural world. I just, as a kid, I was outside in the woods. I was, playing in little creeks, and so there's that, right? So you have that. And then in 2007, I went on a magazine assignment, so as a travel writer, and I went to central Mexico to the overwintering site of the Monarch butterfly, and I wrote the story. But what happened to me there, it was one of the most moving experiences of my life. And I would say it was a spiritual experience. And so when I started writing this book, the most spiritual experiences of my life, there are 3. And I would say that it was being with my grandmother when she died, was giving birth to my son, and being with those monarchs on that mountaintop. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have an experience that feels on the level of life and death on that very intimate scale, I couldn't let go of that story. I think I wanted to turn the story into a book. I'm like, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm trying to write about it. But it was, what was it about that experience that was so moving to me? And I think that I started wrestling with that. And also that experience made me think, what else am I missing? So the Monarch Migration has gotten some press lately, unfortunately, because numbers have been sporadic, although this year I think it's different. But when I got that assignment, I had never heard of the migration. And so what am I missing, right? So I started keeping lists. This is in 2007. So I started keeping lists of other phenomena, fantastic, what was it that I felt with those monarchs, and where else could that feeling be had, right? So that's what started the list making, right? And does that answer the question? And then there's the whole, how this journey took place. I mean, that's kind of keeps going. Like, how do you have this idea and then how do you live it out? You know, but that's really that was the root of it. And then I had my son, and so I had my son, and it's a really difficult time for me. I was a travel writer. I, you know, not all the time, you know, but I was also a teacher, but travel writing, it was like I was pretty sure I was never going to leave my house again. I was absolutely certain I was never going to write again. And so that kind of came to a head, and it's, you know, a lot of people talk about seeing the world through their children's eyes. I hear that a lot. Like, you know, I mean, like, oh, it's great to see the world through my children's eyes. And I agree. But I was like, what would it be like to see the world as my son is seeing it? You know, he's just like, everything's new and amazing. And I'm kind of like, everything's new and amazing. And so we're out there like exploring together. And you know, I'm not, and rather than, I don't know, I mean, I was not living vicariously, but like embodying that experience of wonder. Because another thing that I think as a culture we do is we talk about childlike wonder. Oh, they have a childlike wonder. But I'm like, you guys, let's just grow that, right? Let's just grow the wonder. Let's make it adult size. So, yeah, so that's the long answers.
Well, that's a good answer. But how do you keep this childlike wonder? How do you think people can keep it? Because you kept it. Obviously, you're so wondrous about everything. which is wonderful.
How do you, I don't know. You know what? For me, so the Monarchs. So one of the things that's amazing about the Monarchs. So I live in Boone, North Carolina. So it's Appalachian Mountains. And in my yard, I have just like these crazy patches of wild things growing. And it's blackberries and milkweed, which the Monarchs depend on. So every year, when those monarchs come, and they're making their way from Canada, just little butterflies, from Canada down to Mexico, I've been there. I know where that butterfly is going, and when that butterfly is in my yard, I'm in my backyard, but I am connected to this extraordinary migration. And I think that maybe that's, you know, when you say like how to keep this adult, to find a way to find a way to observe, witness, and appreciate that sort of interconnectivity, which is everywhere. When we step outside here, it's like the wind. That connectivity, and I think for me, it's that monarch butterfly. When I see that butterfly, I am like, it taps in, you know, and I don't know. So wonder, I think one thing is just really paying attention. It's something that I find sometimes I'm forgetting the lessons and like relearning the same lessons over and over again. But I don't know, connectivity I think is really important, and whatever it is that makes you curious, I think to just go learn as much as you can about it, you know, for whatever it is. Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to add something. I'm an artist, and I always say childlike wonder with an adult's awareness. That kind of sums it.
I like that very much.
I thought that might help you, like you were trying.
I love that. Yes. A childlike sense of wonder with an adult's
Awareness.
I like that very much.
I thought you
Yeah.
You know, I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about is your child and I mean the whole thing about being a mom. You know, I stayed home with my daughter until she was 18. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm very aggressive. I had a high-tech startup from home. It's my life. I love it. You know, I'm a geek to the max. Having said that, when she walks in the room, 90% of my ambition and everything else falls away. I'd rather listen to her, you know, talk about some date she had with whoever than anything I'm doing. So it's just, for me, it was just, I couldn't leave her. And I didn't. And I have no regrets. So I just, it's just, and I think, I don't know. So I just, I don't know how you could, yeah, so I just want to explore that.
Well, I hope that the date went well, first of all. I don't know, is there a way to pose that as a question?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, how do you handle your relationship with your son, I suppose, and the whole, and how connected you are to him, and how do you find it possible to even walk out the door?
How to walk out the door. You know, and actually, this is interesting, but I would say that it's harder. It's actually it's been harder for me to walk out the door. I mean, I've been away from home this is the third day I've been away from home, and it was harder to walk out the door this week than it was for me in those previous trips. And I'm not sure. I was actually thinking about that, and I was like, oh, you know, like it's like really hard. But and here's what I've thought about it, and I think, you know, that first year, so like, and it was a really, really difficult year, and it's like, I don't know, you know, it's like, have you been diagnosed with postpartum depression? Like, how, you know, was your son wasn't latching correctly, you know, that's why you're having so much trouble. But, you know, they're like all of these, it was hard. It was like a really, really hard time. Like, my son didn't latch, you know, it's like he, colicky, it's like, I don't know, it's like, I don't know what the elements were. But it was a very, very difficult year. I think there were physical, there were emotional, there were spiritual elements going on there.
Right.
I was like thrust into this like life and death, like it was huge things, and here I am, not really sure how to deal with it. But I also think that in that first year, and you know, I don't know, like this is. I wrote it in the book, so I'm going to talk about it. It's like, seriously, you guys, I heard the audio book of this. And when I heard it, like, it's like the first, like, 4 pages or something, and I, like, heard somebody read it, and I just was like, cannot believe that I told people that. And I don't know why it was different to have someone saying it, but it was like, seriously, it was like, okay, like, I really shared that. But I think that, you know, that first year, I don't know, I mean, the attachment, it's like, literally, like, my son was colicky, and you know, when people say that my son truly did not sleep unless he was on my person. Truly, like, he would scream. He just liked to be close, and it was good, but it was hard, you know. And then with nursing, you know, it's like nursing, it's like pretty much like where you're like nursing, you're like, oh my God, I hope I can get a snack before it's time to nurse again, or he's just gonna get crumbs all over his head. You know, like, I mean, that level of connect, you know, like where it's like, okay, like you're in my body, and now you're attached to my body. And so I don't know. It's like there was that moment, how to walk out the door. It's like, okay, so I don't know. It's like I had to walk out the door. Here's the thing. It's not, what I did in here is not something that everybody wants to do. Like, there are places in here that I know for a fact a lot of people do not want to go. But last night I was in Portland, and I've never been to Portland, I've never been to Portland in my life. But last night I was with people. I saw someone I have not seen since I was 15 years old. And when we were 15 years old, we spent 3 weeks just like in a bus camping and traveling around Australia. We were 2 15-year-old girls, like, traveling around Australia. Like, I have always traveled. So it's not like I've all of a sudden just like, I'm gonna leave. And I've created a career where this is my work, right? So it's like, if I said that I was going to go for a week for a book tour, or I'm gonna go to a business conference, or I'm gonna go do this, I mean, some people would, yeah, I don't know. It's the fact that my job is sort of unusual, I think, makes that something that people sort of like, I don't know, it somehow brings it to the forefront of a conversation. But this is just me. I mean, this is like who I am. Like, I've always traveled, and the real question was like, can I still be who I am? Can I still be the same person and still be a good mother? And this is what's interesting, because like honor and appreciate like my friends who don't work at all and like only stay home and just, you know, and I appreciate like part-time work. There's so many different ways to be a good mother, I think. And that's what I really think I was really struggling with, and what I had to really just take some time to figure out. That I think socially we have a very, very limited script about what it means to be a mother. I think we have an idea about what a mother looks like, and I wasn't necessarily like fitting what I thought a mother was supposed to look like. And I now know that I'm not quite what society thinks a mother is supposed to look like. And I find it really interesting because when I think about like adventure travel writers, and I think about adventure travel writers that are women, there are more adventure travel writers that are men than there are women. And when I think about the women who I admire, they very rarely are those books written while they're a mother. They're written before they're a mother. They're women who don't have children. And so I didn't really have any sort of model. I didn't have anybody talking about having the sort of interests and passions that I did as a mother. Does that make sense? I mean, it's just who I am. I don't know. It's like how could you walk out the door? It's like I wasn't going. I would go for a week, and that is a long time. But 3 days has been tougher because I'm like, like, how did school pictures go? Like, I really need to know that, And my son's gonna talk to me. And when he was very young, I mean, it was just a little different. But also, I'm very fortunate, and he's very fortunate, that we have an extended family. So my parents are there, my husband is there, and I mean, I would be on these trips and people would say, can you believe that she left her son with her husband for a week? Now imagine a man at like an academic conference, a business conference. Can you believe that he left his son with the mother for a week? I mean, it's like really interesting, and I wasn't really aware of this. It was just something that I was feeling, and so that's come out of it. Like it's something that I'm suddenly very aware of, and it's interesting. But there's so many different ways to parent, and so many different emotions too, and so many different levels. It's like every kid has their own personality, and every parent has their own personality, and that's part of the magic of it all. Yes.
Okay. 2 questions, quick
Okay.
and easy. Where'd you get the exotic dress? And 2, could you describe your evolution as a travel writer? Academic preparation. How did you land that assignment to track the monarch butterflies to Mexico? I mean, the
Okay.
process. Yeah.
Thank you so much for calling my dress exotic. I am very pleased to say that I found it on the clearance sale section of Anthropology.com. Cool. The sales section. And so my evolution. So I, when I was a little kid, I was really like filling notebooks, like I want to be a writer. I want to be a writer. My grandfather sees me. He's like, I think Leigh Ann's going to be a writer. I think I might want to write now. So it's like, I've had this long-term like generations of like, hey, wait a minute. So writing. I actually in college thought I was going to be a photographer. See, my parents really appreciate that. I want to be a writer. No, I think I'm going to be a photographer. I really, not the most like, they didn't think that was the most practical path for me at the time. And maybe it wasn't, but it was my path, and it was the right path. So in college, photography. Then I left school for photography. And I realized that the stories that I wanted to tell and the stories that people told me, because I really love people. And so people would share things with me that then I wanted to share. And it's just part of my conversation just with the world or myself and just that process. So I decided to write, and so I worked at a community newspaper, and I really was like the writer and the photographer because there were, very few people on staff, and I sort of was just put out into the world. It's like, I'm gonna write feature stories, and nobody's even really paying attention to where I'm going or what I'm doing, so I just wrote, met amazing people, wrote. And I did that for a few years, and then I went back to school, so I have crazy degrees. I have a degree in Appalachian cultural studies, documentary studies, and I did go back because I do teach, and so I did actually go back and I have an MFA in creative writing. So when I was in graduate school, I was like, it's always longer. So like articles, magazine articles, that's the kind of thing. And so the story, how did I land the butterfly story? I research, like some people might say stalk, but I research editors. If I want to work with an editor, I research them like crazy. I'm like, where did they work before they worked here? What kind of stories are they doing? Who have they worked with before? I'm going to read everything that they're doing. What's the similarity? Like, are there threads here? Are there themes? And so I did this to an editor at the Washington Post magazine. And I sent him something that really, like, I didn't know what I was doing. It was an essay. It didn't really have the meat of what the story needed to have, but he said, hey, no, I this isn't right, but I really admire your writing. Like, there's something here that I'm interested in. And so he was willing to have that conversation with me. I did some assignments. We got to the point where he was like, I've always wanted to send someone to see the monarch butterflies in Mexico. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of the path. So many paths, so many different ways. Yeah. Other questions?
We get some signing.
Okay, sure. I would just love to keep talking. Would you come and talk? No, I mean, like, we can talk one-on-one. That's what's cool about this. It's like, yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay, sure.
So after all of this, do you think you're a great mother? Or would there be are you sorry about anything, or have you regretted anything, or you just think that you've done the right thing the whole time?
Well, here's the thing about parenthood, I think, is that, I mean, and this is actually very important, I think. Actually, so phenomenal means that which is extraordinary. It also means that which is directly observable. Okay? And I think we live in an abstract culture. Like, we want to know if it's raining, we look at our phone, we look at television, we don't look out the window really, and we definitely don't have to walk outside, right? So we have this abstract knowledge. And we're also a culture, we trust experts. We trust experts so much. Like, we're like, what do the experts have to say? I'm going to do research. Research of the expert. You know, like, I'm researching editors. I'm researching, what do the experts say about this? And then all of a sudden, I think, like, for me, then all of a sudden it's like, I was like studying, like, how to be a good mother. It's like, I'm reading all the books. It's like, how pregnancy. It's like, what can I eat? What can I not eat? Like, I'm researching, I'm studying it, you know, like, and then it's like, sleep. Like, how do we get to sleep? Like, well, you know, what do we do? So I was like trying to study how to be a parent. Like, I was trying to like read up on it, and I couldn't, because here's the thing. It's like, my son is a very unique individual. I'm a very unique individual. You know, when it's the middle of the night and something's happening, it's like, that is a very specific and unique situation. And there's no expert that can tell me exactly the right thing. And because I feel like I have come from a culture, an expert culture, it's like I have not been trusting my direct experience. I no longer know how to even trust my instincts. I have very little trust in myself. And so I think that one of the things that parenthood really awakened me to this. And you know, you'll see, I mean, in the book, I mean, I really meet a lot of people, some who have grown up in cultures that have very, very different ways of thinking about this, like subjective and objective knowledge. And it really, I feel like it's there was a little bit of a journey to trust myself. And the thing is, you know, the question of but I don't, you know, there's no way to say what would have happened, or I don't know. It's like, I think that part of being a parent is sort of questioning that. It's like my friend who spent the month on an island. It's like, there's a lot of ambiguity there. Like, there's a lot of ambiguity there, and I think that there's like a quote in the book, and I don't even know if I can directly quote myself, but I'll try. So I say, wonder isn't about answers, it's about becoming more comfortable with questions. And I think that so I think that that's part of the journey, learning how to trust myself and becoming a little more comfortable with the ambiguity that is parenting. Every single day, every single stage, it's like something new is happening, you know, and I don't know. So I don't know if it's really like an answer, but
That's a good answer.
let's talk. I mean, we'll talk. Like, you guys come on up. Like, let's, yeah, like, come on, let's talk, yeah. Oh,
How old is your son?
he's 5. Yeah.
And you're about 20?
That's great.
That's a compliment.
It was a great one. Yeah.
A few things. One, I'm sure you're a great mom. I'm sure. One of the things that it reminds me is, I think it might have been out of Othello. It was like they were talking about the mom. It was like, you know, she couldn't have been as good a mother if she hadn't loved her garden so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I think of is I was talking to a little gal. She was a young woman from India, and she's a great engineer. I mean, just did a fantastic presentation. And she was saying, you know, once you get married, that's it. It was like, you know, you're not coming back. And I was just like, you know, and I'm gonna say, I mean, the years since my little one went to college, I've done probably 10 times more in these past 3 years. But I kept my hand in there. That's to me, it's just such a shame. If you don't keep your hand in there, you're out of the game. You're out of the game. Not in what you do, but in what I do, in engineering, technology. You're out of the game. You don't. And I mean, I really, my hands are just off to you. You're opening up the world to a lot of young gals. It's just, the world is just different, you know, because of, I think, people like you who are just, you can make it different. It's okay to be all different kinds of moms. But here, in the privileged United States of America and the Western world.
That's actually, I have a friend who she's actually a former student of mine, and she lives in she lives in a VW bus. She lives in a van, and she travels the country, and she just lives her life. That's how she should. But she talked to someone, and I can't remember where they're from, but it's really stuck with me. But it was a guy who was traveling, and he said, you know, like, Americans like have so many, like, so much privilege, so many opportunities, but not everybody's taking advantage of them.
Oh, well, that's...
Because there are so many different ways to live, and right, and so that's the thing. It's like there are so many different ways to live, and that's, you know, beyond parenting, beyond anything. It's like there are just so many different ways to live, and to live a good life, and to be a good, like, just a full person. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys you've called me 20 good. I don't know. You're really hitting me with some more. No, I'm kidding. Seriously, you guys, I would really love for you to read the book. I would really love for you to read it, and I would really love to hear what you think of it. I think that a lot of the things that you're bringing up, it's interesting. Like, it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting conversation, and some of it I don't even know. Like, there are conversations here I'm not even aware of, but you guys will be. You know what I mean? Like, there's I don't know. So I think, okay, come talk to me. Yeah,
Talk to her. Come get your book signed. Ann's next book will be on how to bottle this energy so we can all have this kind of energy.
But you don't need to bottle it because phenomenal, you can directly observe it.